Welcome to On the Beat, where we bring you a different Buffalo Bills beat reporter every week, exclusively on the Overreaction Sports Network.
Well, what is going on, everybody? Welcome everybody into On the Beat, brought to you exclusively, as Bruce Nolan just said, on the Overreaction Sports Network, powered by Believe. This is a show where generally we bring you an exclusive interview with a different Bills beat reporter every week, but we are doing something a little different right before training camp starts. Last week, we had Antoine Staley from the New York Jets, a beat reporter for the Jets. Next week, we've got Mike Giardi for the Patriots, and this week, we've got a special gentleman joining us that I'll get to here in a second. My name is Joe Miller. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Miller Wired, alongside my co-host, John Fina, former Buffalo Bill offensive tackle for 10 years. But please do us a favor. Please like, please subscribe, whatever platform you are consuming this podcast or vidcast on. Please do us a favor. Get our numbers up. Spread the word, subscribe, like, do all that good stuff. We appreciate you so much. But as I said a second ago, now joining us from Sports Illustrated Fan Nation and the All Dolphins podcast, Alain Poupart. Alain, we are glad to have you on. How is the NFL dead season treating you, sir?
Nastily. There is no NFL dead season when you operate a team-specific website. Got to feed the monster, so to speak. So been pounding away. There is a little vacation on the horizon.
Nice.
Going away before we get back into it for training camp.
When you live in South Florida, where do you vacation?
Anywhere where it's not 100 degrees.
Yeah.
So John has
there. I'm in Tucson, Arizona, Alan. I understand that. So you're probably fleeing back to Canada and Montreal. Maybe it's a little cooler climes up there.
No, we're actually going to Europe, the family.
Oh, very good. That's excellent. My wife and I just went to we went to Ireland, then we went to London for the Bills game, and then we went to France, Paris, France after that. So recently been there. We had a great time. It was our first time in Europe. So you guys enjoyed that. But it is excellent to have you. Really, really excited to talk about just what's happening on the ground there in South Florida as it pertains to the Dolphins going into this 2024 season before training camp opens. And we don't want to keep you long, about 25, 30 minutes, but we'll go ahead and we'll jump right into this if that's all right with you. So clearly the number one thing in Dolphins land in South Florida and across Dolphins Nation right now is the Tua extension. It's all over my Twitter feed, even as a Bills fan. What can you tell us about where they are in this process? Is it close? Is there an expected dollar amount? Like, is he going to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL when this is finished, or are they going to push?
A great question. Starting off, I wish you would ease into the tough questions, but yeah, I mean, you right off the bat, it's topic number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you name it. Are they close? Well, they're as close as it takes for one or the other side to move off their position. Where does it land? The problem for the Dolphins, and I'm sorry if I'm going in different directions
You're
here.
good.
The problem with the Dolphins, what didn't help was the Lions deal with Jared Goff.
Mm-hmm.
Even more so than that of the Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor Lawrence has more of an uncertainty. You could make the case that the upside there is bigger in terms of what he can be. Whereas Jared Goff, I mean, he had back-to-back seasons with a passer rating over 100 with the Rams. And a couple of years later, they decided, you know what? We're not getting to where we want to go with him as our quarterback, so let's trade him and bring in Matthew Stafford. And boom, they win the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
Well, last year, Jared Goff goes to the NFC, or should I say he's part of a Lions team that goes to the NFC Championship game. And he's got that on his resume. And the question becomes, how much is it Jared Goff? How much is it the team and the offense around him? Which is an argument that can be made with Tua. And with Tua, the other question is he's in between Lawrence and Goff in terms of where he is in his career, in terms of experience. Has he reached his ceiling? How much farther can he go? There's the injury history that's lurking in the shadows, even though he played all 17 games last year. So you combine all those factors, the dollar amount is going to be significant, not quite as much as the guaranteed money, which is where pretty safe to assume that's where the hiccup is. And then Tua comes out after a mini camp practice saying the market is the market.
Right.
Which basically means you see what the Lions gave Jared Goff, give that to me.
Smart man.
Yeah.
Well, and the Dolphins are saying, well, the Lions are being stupid for giving him that kind of contract. Does that mean that we have to be stupid for doing the same?
Right.
And sorry, John.
Well, it's just a little bit of a standoff, right? So
Yes.
Nothing changes in the market until some point an owner or general manager and head coach all get together and say it's not sustainable, right? We can't put 20% or 25% of our cap dollar into one position. And then adding on that, how much further does this make a problem when now you have to choose between Tyreek Hill, who says he wants more, and Waddle, who thinks he deserves highest paid wide receiver type money. So how much does that add in as an ancillary concern to going forward on the Tua deal?
Yeah, and here's the thing: it very well could be that the Dolphins have said, listen, like I said, just because the Lions and Jaguars didn't always go to the top of the market, there's no law that says that every new quarterback who signs has to go to the top.
Fair.
And the other part of the point you bring up is that the Dolphins already gave Jalen Waddle his extension, which actually was very good in terms of numbers from a Dolphins standpoint. It's good for Waddle; he got good money, but it comes out if you combine the 2 years he had left this year and the 5th-year option plus the 3 years of the extension, it comes out to 5 years, like 104 or 5 million or something. It's for $21 million a year, which is it's a good average for the Dolphins considering how productive Waddle has been. As far as Tyreek now wanting his own extension because he's seen Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, and Amon-Ra St. Brown pass him in annual average, the question the Dolphins have to ask themselves, it's on one side, how much money can we devote to the 3 guys who make our passing game go versus can we really justify re-signing Tua but not re-signing Tyreek Hill when he's the guy who's the 2-time team MVP, who I would argue, and I'm not the only one, who's the guy who makes the offense special.
Yeah, it seems like the Dolphins somewhat future-proof themselves with Tyreek Hill getting a little bit older. The Bills just went through this exact same situation with Stephon Diggs. So we're feeling this. And there's arguments on both sides for us as Bills fans and the media here as far as, did Stephon Diggs lose a step? Was it just he was disgruntled and unhappy? Is the system in the design phase right now where it's excluding him and he got a little bit? We don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. But back to the Dolphins, to John's point, you've got to wonder, like, you're going to pay Tua $50 million average probably per year. If you make him the highest paid quarterback, he could be 55, somewhere around there, 57. Jalen Waddle at some point in time, his
21.
contract his contract's going to catch up. Tyreek Hill. I mean, can you devote $100 million to 3 players when you're talking about a salary cap at $250 by then, something like that? I mean, for the next year or two, clearly they're going to be in a relatively good situation, but just like it has with the Bills, it's going to catch up.
No, and it does eventually in all circumstances when you're giving out those kinds of contracts. But when we're talking about the annual average, understand that that's over the length of the contract. That's not necessarily what it's going to be every single year against the cap.
Correct.
That said, it is going to be a significant amount. But again, this is where, and I wrote this for the website last week. Does it make sense for the Dolphins to extend Tua if they don't extend and not extend Tyreek Hill? Decide because his guaranteed money is done after this year, which is partly why he wants a contract extension. And the other issue is he's seen the other wide receivers get bigger deals.
Mm-hmm. So
that's all part of the decision-making process. And we're just talking about 3 guys on offense. Jalen Phillips at some point is going to need a new contract.
Yes.
So that's somebody they want to keep around. Javon Holland, I would suspect he's going to get a new contract soon. He's heading into the last year of his rookie contract. So the Dolphins have decisions to make, and it's not a slam dunk. And this is where the fans, there's going to be some battle between the fans and I don't think you have that in Buffalo nearly as much as in Miami, where you have a very polarizing quarterback where a big segment is like, look at the numbers Tua has put up the last 2 years. You're stupid. Extend them right now.
Right.
He's earned it. And the other side is like, well, yeah, look at all the talent he's got around him. He hasn't done well against playoff opponents or down the stretch. Make him play on the 5th-year option.
Yeah, for sure. It's the Bills did go through that. We just went through it for 20 years with guys like Trent Edwards and JP Lossman and Doug Flutie and Rob Johnson and a bunch of guys that weren't worth having these conversations about. But you talked about making decisions, and clearly, the Dolphins, like the Bills, are starting to have to do because of Josh Allen's contract and some other ones, including the Stephon Diggs contract. I mean, the Bills let him, but they bounced him out of this place on a $31 million cap hit. It's not as bad as the Broncos at 53, but 31 is a big number to eat. But the Dolphins are already kind of making those decisions. It was very, very, I felt good about watching Christian Wilkins walk out the door. Christian Wilkins, to me, was a menace when we played the Dolphins. I mean, obviously there's the back and forth between him and Josh Allen. There's the gif of Josh Allen waving goodbye to him, all the stuff that they've gone. I'm sure they respect each other as players, but on the field, Christian Wilkins was a dominant defensive tackle. You got to feel that loss is going to mean something, especially with some of the injuries that are out there, which we'll get to in a second, but that's a decision they had to make. How is Calais Campbell? Obviously they just signed, but Calais Campbell at this point in his
he's
career
like 200 years old right now.
He's not Christian Wilkins. How does the defense adjust with the loss of Christian Wilkins?
Well, yeah, before I answer that, I will say that Josh Allen's family jewels are very happy that he's now in Las Vegas. We're facing him twice a year. That's for sure. Well, the Dolphins made a decision based on positional value. It's like, can we really pay that kind of money for a defensive tackle who's been really, really good?
Right.
I will give you that. But before last year, had not been a major factor in the pass rush. Last year, it clicked, and I don't know how much of it, if you want to say, it was like he's a guy playing for a contract, so that jacked up his production. How much of it was it the scheme that Dick Fangio brought in his 1 year as defensive coordinator? And let's not forget that the guy playing alongside him, Zach Sealer, had basically the same numbers. In fact, had one more sack than Christian did.
Interesting.
So I think the bottom line, like I said before, though, it's positional value. The Dolphins were not going to pay that kind of money for a defensive tackle who's not named Chris Jones.
Yeah.
Or Aaron Donald before him, or guys who can wreck games.
Right.
Because as good as he was in big games, the one big play he made, he had like the sack strip of Josh Allen last year in the regular season finale. In the other games, it wasn't there. Unlike guys like Chris Jones, who every big game makes a game-turning play. Yeah. So Dolphins were like, sorry, we love you, Christian, but it's not worth our money. So the Dolphins, what they did is they signed practically every defensive tackle on the market. Jonathan,
they really did. They really did.
Yeah.
I mean, Gallimore, Hand, Jones. The list goes on.
Yeah. But you poo-pooed the Calais Campbell edition, and yeah, he's old, but he was still good last year.
He's solid.
I love the guy. I make fun because he is old, but I think his productivity it's been alarmingly good considering the number of miles he has on him. So I think about this in terms of what did they do? They weren't very good in red zone defense. They weren't very good in third down stops. Losing Wilkins for Sealer, who's, in your words, more or less equivalent, and adding a bunch of players, losing Xavier Howard. Did they do anything really exciting? Where's the optimism other than Chop Robinson for improving a defense that wasn't terrific?
Well, I might counter that by saying they were fourth in total yards allowed heading into week 17, which is when they lost Xavier Howard on the first series. They lost Bradley Chubb at the end of that game. They were already without Jalen Phillips. And then in the playoff, and then in the regular season finale against the Bills, it was 14-7 Dolphins heading into the fourth quarter. So they did some good things on defense. Also remember, they didn't have Jalen Ramsey for the first 7 games of the year. That's going to make a difference. You mentioned the loss of Xavier Howard. Xavier Howard, who's been a fabulous cornerback in the NFL, however, the last 2 years been injured more often than not been the same guy. They replaced him with Kendall Fuller coming over from Washington, which probably should be an upgrade. They upgraded a linebacker by bringing in Jordan Brooks, former first-round pick of the Seahawks, and Anthony Walker Jr., former starter for the Colts, to replace Jerome Baker. So that's an advantage there. The biggest change on defense, and this is an unknown, is Anthony Weaver now being the new defensive coordinator after Vic Fangio and the Dolphins, as they said, mutually parted ways with Fangio going to Philly. And much to the delight of several of the players, if we're going to be honest, and a lot of players did not appreciate Fangio's grumpy old man approach. As a grumpy old man myself, I have no issue with it.
So are we. We are too.
See, there you go. That doesn't play well with today's
Miller.
players, a lot of them. But the thing is that Anthony Weaver's he does come from Baltimore, which has a great track record of producing good coaches and being in one of the best organizations in the NFL. But the truth is, he's been in a DC 1 year. That was 2020 with Houston, when that team ranked near the bottom of the league, although they had a ton of injuries. So we don't know. I mean, obviously we're in July, and we talk to players, during the offseason program, and this John, it's like, oh, everything's wonderful. We love the guy. He's so great, refreshing new guy. We're so excited to play for him. Yeah, that's great. But what's it going to look like in September and October? So we don't know that. And then you have the Chubb Phillips injury factor as well.
That's actually where I was about to go. Talking with Alain Poupart from Sports Illustrated Fan Nation and the All Dolphins podcast. When you look at just that specifically, Jalen Phillips as well as Bradley Chubb, both year-long injuries. Jalen Phillips, week 12, as you said, Bradley Chubb last game of the season, rather. I apologize. You're looking at a situation, as much as that offense is going to hum. We know that. Like that Dolphins offense is going to do what that Dolphins offense is going to do. The defense, on the other hand, it feels like, as I read just things around the Dolphins kind of landscape and between beat reporters and just journalists, and then you got the national guys and even the fans, the media fans, or not the media fans, but the fans in general. I don't know if we lost John together or just his picture there, but
is this something I said, John? Sorry.
Yeah, I think he's still with us. There he is. He's back. When you look at it, there's a lot of optimism around all the stuff that you just said, the players that they added. But what the one piece that seems to be a little bit concerning is the pass rush with Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb and I love Jalen Phillips. Like, that dude is a machine as well. What are they going to do? What do you feel like they're going to do to kind of manufacture a pass rush? And it's interesting because we just did a show on how the Bills are going to manufacture a pass rush, because we've lost a lot of defensive edge guys as well. So what are your thoughts just as far as the Dolphins going to do just pass rush wise in 2024?
Well, this is where, as John mentioned, Chop Robinson hopefully comes in, and hopefully the crazy physical traits that he has produce sacks and TFLs and pressures at the NFL level in the way that they didn't at Penn State. They also drafted Mo Kamara out of Colorado State, another guy who actually is the opposite of Chop Robinson, in that he doesn't have the measurables, but the production was there at Colorado State. They also signed Shaquille Barrett.
Yep, Shaq Barrett. Yep,
fabulous years with the Buccaneers, but the
I wanted Shaq Barrett. Yes,
you did. Okay,
yeah.
But the numbers weren't there last year,
right?
And I think as another way to compensate, and hopefully Chubb and Phillips, from a Dolphins standpoint, come back at some point sooner rather than later and re-become Chubb and Phillips. In the meantime, you're counting on those three guys. You're hoping Calais Campbell can give you a little bit in the pass rush. You're hoping Zach Sealer can come close to what he did last year when he had 10 sacks. And then what you're also likely to see is more blitzing than the Dolphins did last year, when they did it selectively, but not a ton. Certainly not like they did under Josh Boyer the previous year under Brian Flores' system. So I think it's a combination of those factors that the Dolphins hope will help the pass rush.
Very good.
Yep. Hey, I want to step back a little bit, talk my theory on how we can, mitigate the salaries of quarterbacks, right? And it's got to be a process. So at some point, like I did in my career, Alan, when they wanted to extend me, and I was like, no, I'm just going to play out my last year. I'm going to bet on myself and play it out. And it ended up working for me. What I think that somehow, and I don't know if, one team is going to have to say, you know what, we're going to let you play it out and see how they deliver. Mm-hmm. And if you have to let them go, I think the dynamic changes. If that happens, they go somewhere else and they're mediocre. I think that's the only way this changes. Somebody's going to have to draw a line in the sand and say, you know what, we're getting a lot of good quarterbacks. We've got better coaching in college. We're going to have guys that are prepared. we can't mortgage the future. We can't do what the Buffalo Bills just did, or what every other team is looking at when they do this. What do you think about that as a solution? Not for the Dolphins, but overall.
No, I absolutely see what you're saying, but again, I agree with your premise. Again, it goes back to my idea of why does it always have to be on top? And when it's specific to the Dolphins, because I get this a lot. Well, what happens if Tua has a great year, balls out, and you're going to have to pay more next year? And it's like, well, if he has a great year, balls out, chances are that means the Dolphins actually win a playoff game for the first time since 2000 and maybe advance who knows how far. And is that really such a terrible price to pay? Even if it costs you a little bit more.
Let him prove it out. And then if you allow him to do that, how much does the market change from where it is today to the end of the next season? Does it go up by 5 million? Does it go up by
if it's 57 now and he balls out and it's 61 next year, what are we really talking about?
Right. What's the risk? I think
this is what I've been advocating all along. It's like right now there's incomplete data as far as Tua is concerned, from my standpoint, which is, can he raise a level of play against playoff opponents or down the stretch? And it's not just him, but he's the one who's going to get the bag, so the focus is on him. But the Dolphins, in their last 13 games against teams that made the playoffs that season, including the playoff loss, the 2 playoff losses are 1-12. Well, that ain't going to cut it.
Right.
Okay. Enough. So that begs the last question probably that we have time for. What happens to the darling head coach, Mr. Media Guy with the sunglasses and the outfits, if they don't go and win a playoff game next year? Is he done? Is there hot seat talk right now?
I know there's zero hot seat talk right now. Well, sorry, I shouldn't say that. There's like a little bit of mumbling in the background from some fans who are tired of that playoff win drought. But I believe he's got a lot of equity with the right people, and that's good ownership, the front office. It would take some kind of a catastrophic development in 2024, not injury related, for McDaniel's seat to get any warmth whatsoever.
Yeah, he's a wonderful personality, a wonderful coach. It'd be hard to see him or imagine him losing that team that fast, right? It's something that could erode through some time, but I'm with both of you. I just don't feel that Mike McDaniel is any sort of trouble. Maybe if the wheels completely come off and they're 4-13, there's a spark, but I can't see them being 4-13. And then especially with the front half of their schedule is very good. It was interesting. We had a conversation just when the Bills schedule came out and we looked at the other teams around the East, their schedules. The NFL are, and I know that we said we're going to let you go, but I got literally this. Then I want to ask you one last question. I apologize. We were basically going through just the schedule makers and what the NFL does, and they are setting this season up to effectively be that run down the stretch that we have seen from the Bills and Dolphins the last couple of years. The Dolphins' early schedule is super simple. The Bills is brutal. The back half of the Dolphins is brutal, and the Bills is a little more simple, which is just going to line them up for the Bills, the Dolphins to be out in front again, and then the Bills to kind of begin to chase them down, and it's all going to come to a head right at the end. I don't know if you've seen that, thought of that, or if you've got a comment on that. I
didn't study the Bills to that extent, to be honest with you, but I looked at the Dolphins schedule and it's like, oh my, here we go again. They'll be 9-2. They'll be 9-2 or 9-3. You know, heading into that last 6-game stretch. And you mentioned setting it up for a showdown with the Bills, and they also set it up for a showdown with the Jets if the Jets avoid the catastrophic injuries they had last year, because the Dolphins play them twice in the final 4 games.
Oh my gosh,
or final 5 games, something like that.
Awesome.
So,
Alan, sorry.
I was just going to say, if you were look at the Dolphins schedule again, it's completely shaping up like they'll be 9-2 or whatever, and then here we go again with the season-ending stretch.
Yeah, I got one more question for you. Before I do, tell everybody, Alan, thank you again so much for joining us. Tell everybody where they can find you, find your content, because I'm sure that some Dolphin fans are going to peek into this show just to kind of hear you, because I tag Dolphin stuff all over it. So yeah, just if you want to let everybody know where they can find you, that'd be great. Okay, the written content is on si.com/NFL/Dolphins. That's the Dolphins site for SI and the Fan Nation Network. I'm also on Twitter, my last name @Poupart NFL, and of course I have the All Dolphins podcast. Very good. It's so good to have you. Again, appreciate you joining us for a couple of minutes here today. Last question. There was an interesting back and forth between Dan Orlovsky and Brian Hoyer. Orlovsky feels like Tua is one of the very few quarterbacks in this league that can run the Mike McDaniel system as it is today. And I'll be honest with you, I agree with him. And then Hoyer was like, Tua's a system quarterback. And it's funny because I kind of agree with him. And I guess the question is there a side that you would pick, or can it be both? Can he be like one of the few guys that can run this offense and a system quarterback at the same time? Just, give us some thoughts on that.
Trying to get me in trouble with Dolphin fans, aren't you?
No, if you don't want to answer, I'm good with that too.
I have never shied away from expressing my opinions.
Joe is low key setting you up right here, Alan.
It's a great topic. It's a great topic.
Absolutely. I've gone a few rounds. When Dan Orlovsky made the comment of like, there's not 5 quarterbacks in the world who can operate this offense, like, my thought immediately was like, no, I'm not buying that. And let's also understand that any quarterback who would come in, there would be tweaks to take advantage of what that quarterback does best, just like Mike McDaniel has been masterful at creating an offense that completely tailored and suited for what Tua does best. So, no, I'm not buying this idea that there are only 5 quarterbacks who could have success, especially when you have that ridiculous speed they have at the skill positions. And then Hoyer, that's Tua's a system quarterback. Well, there's certain things he does better. I mean, he can't. Again, it's a perfect marriage the way the Dolphins have constructed their scheme with Tua, but I don't think it's just 5 quarterbacks who could have success with Mike McDaniel and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, and now they added Jalen Wright, and now they added Odell Beckham Jr., and now they added Jonnu Smith.
They're loaded.
No, I'm not buying that.
They're loaded.
Yeah, they're loaded. It's just fun. It's interesting to me because, like, the biggest thing that scares me about them, specifically with Tyreek, is how fast Tua can get the ball out and how accurate he is. And it just seems, I'm going to use the phrase otherworldly as it now sounds like to Bills Mafia. I'm defending Tua, which I am not. Clearly the Bills have the ability to beat him, and they can, but it just from an outsider's perspective, right? He seems pretty good. So John, any final comments or questions?
Yeah, I always like to break Joe's bubble a little bit here. What scares me about them is Mostert and Achane. Those guys, what they're used just so strategically, and they just rip off those 7 to 9 yard runs, and they're backbreakers, right? I think when we play the Dolphins, when the Bills play the Dolphins, I feel like the strategic use of those 2 running backs is really what hurts us the most. And they do that because they set up that passing game, or their passing game sets up the run game in their instance. But those guys are great weapons.
Yep.
If you recall it in the last game last year, in the first half, the Bills had their problems with Achane, and in the second half that completely closed off.
Yeah.
And then Tyreek Hill's mere presence on the field just loosens up everything.
Yep.
With the opposing defenses, and so his value to this offense is immeasurable.
Absolutely. Had a fantastic conversation with you, Alan. Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Alain Poupart from SI Fan Nation, as well as the All Dolphins podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been tuned into On the Beat on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, powered by Believe. We thank you guys so much for joining us. Please go find Alan's content. But for me, for John, for Alan, appreciate you guys. Love you so much. Go Bills.
Go Bills.